The moon. So the moon I put as a purely water card, as a purely blue card, um, because again, the moon is related to water. Um, the moon controls our tides, um, and the moon in general, a lot of the symbology, the associations that we place on aspects of water are similar to the associations we make with the moon. So the moon is nighttime, unconsciousness, intuition, reflection, receptivity, coolness, to some degree femininity. The moon is seen as the feminine aspect of the sun in some cases. And so all of that kind of stuff, those same kind of keywords or key ideas uh, are found in water interpretations as well. So they're kind of linked as symbols. They're almost in many ways the same symbol to me, water and the moon. So it's a fairly simple card. There isn't all of the symbology um, that you may see in a traditional card, except a moon. Um, but nonetheless, there's that idea of reflection and perception. Again, we come to perception. Whenever we're talking about the moon, we're talking about perception, whether it's on the moon card or on the High Priestess card. We're talking about perception because, um, again, how we experience the moon, whether it's full or crescent uh, or a new moon, that perception is really, it's not the moon itself. It has nothing to do with the moon. It's how the sun's light, the sun's radiance, is reflecting off of the moon relative to our vantage point. Um, and there's also a darkness, a hiddenness about the moon, because the moon usually only appears at night. We can sometimes see the moon during the daytime, depending on the moon's position in the sky uh, and our rotation. Um, but usually the moon is only seen at night, and even when it's seen during the day, it's faint. It can be easily missed in the brightness of a daytime sky. At night, things that are illuminated by the moon are never fully illuminated. They're always kind of in half shadow and half darkness. There's also a little bit of a silvery glow to them. Sometimes things can seem better in under moonlight than they do in the daylight. And other times, of course, that darkness, that obscurity, um, prevents us from seeing something fully in its full beauty, too. Um, and then there's also aspects of fear and the unconsciousness, in the unconscious, and darkness, and fear of darkness and the unconscious. So things that are buried in the deep unconscious that are feared, that we don't usually explore, even at night. And that's kind of why we sleep and why we dream, is in our dreaming state, we're exploring some of the layers of the unconscious. Or we are hiding from them. Sleep is a great way to hide from darkness, the dark things in ourselves. And yet the moon has the potential to illuminate those things, and to illuminate those things in a soft way. A soft and cool way, in a more motherly, feminine, loving way than the sun can, where the sun can sometimes be too harsh. The moon can illuminate the darkness in a way that makes it more palatable, more acceptable. So I guess I'll leave that there for the moon. It's a fascinating card. Fascinating. Not necessarily my my interpretation of the card, but just the concept of the moon is I find fascinating. The sun, the bright sun. Um, so here in the star, I talked about 8 points. Now in the sun, we actually have 9 points. Um, that's partly just the result of the, well, it's mostly both in the sun and in the star. That's mostly just the result of the geometry, where the sun 19. Um, I could have done 19 circles, or if I did 2 layers of circles, which I did, it's actually 3. The divisions are a little bit less even, except it works out well mathematically if we go 9 plus 9 plus 1, um, in the same way that the star 17 worked out, 8 plus 8 plus 1. Um, and so there's actually a really close kinship between the star and the sun, and they're oppositional. It's the same. Actually the same opposition that strength and the hermit had, where strength was the masculine elements, fire and air. The sun is also fire and air, and both can be associated with Leo too. I'm pretty sure that strength is more closely associated with Leo, but they can both kind of share aspects of Leo. Um, and then the elements, the more feminine elements of earth and water, are shared in the hermit as well. So these two cards, the star and the sun, and strength and the hermit, kind of pair each other. They balance each other. And I know often the sun is, its opposite is seen as the moon, but there's kind of a trinity there going on actually between the moon and the star and the sun. I like to think of the star and the sun as being kind of paired because stars are suns. The stars that we see in the sky are suns. They're just suns that are much further away. And in fact, our sun, which we see as has a bigger influence on us, is actually a tiny little thing. It's a relatively small star, even in our galaxy. And our galaxy is actually a relatively small galaxy among many larger galaxies. And so, um, in a way, the greatness of the star, um, any star we could pick, we could associate certain stars to the star card. But for now, let's keep it general. Most of the stars that we see at night um, are either suns that are much bigger and much brighter than our personal sun, our personal being all of us on Earth. um, and some of those stars are, in fact, not stars, but galaxies. They're just so bright and so far away that they appear like little tiny shining bright lights in our sky. Um, so anyway, about the sun, the numerology is 9, 9 plus 1, whereas 8 was 8, the star was 8, 8, and 1. Um, so the sun, there is a 9 association with the sun too in um, certain depictions of the sun in geometry, in architecture, in spiritual architecture. It's a 9-pointed star. I'm not exactly sure why. Could also be a mathematical thing. Um, but there's an idea of the 9 also being associated with the hermit, and the doubling of the 9 and the 9 and the 1, 9 plus 9, so large individuality as or large completeness as an individual as 9, plus another large completeness as an individual as 9, plus a 1, kind of flips that from interior to expansively exterior and bright. And there's a reversal there between the interior of the hermit and the exterior of the sun, the bright, shining, radiating sun. Um, and then we have also that relationship between 9 as the hermit and the 9 points of the sun, and 8 as strength and the 8 points of the star. So there's different kind of oppositional relationships there between cards, and the elemental oppositions are there too. Um, I don't really have a lot to say about the sun as a concept, except that it's bright and illuminating, and it's usually seen as a very positive card, and it brings everything into full light, but sometimes that's not always so good either. Sometimes, I mean, there really is no good and bad in many senses. Um, but that full illumination can be shocking. It can burn. It can be too much. It can be too much to take in. And yet, at the same time, in the same way that the star, as a concept, as a card, is nourishing, so is the sun. The sun is nourishing. The sunlight is the first thing that nourishes all the plants that feed us. And without it, we would all die. So, and yet at the same time, it's hot and it's burning and it's volatile, and it actually causes damage too. It's so powerful that its power is almost as damaging as it is nourishing. So there's a balance there that the star is much more soft on. And the relationship also between the sun and the moon, where at night, thankfully we have a night, because the moon kind of tempers the sun, and so that's the relationship between the elements in the sun and the moon, and the elements in the temperance card. So these things, even though I've kind of changed some of the traditional associations elementally, they're not. There's purpose to them. There's certainly reason and interconnectivity to them. So the sun, it's important to recognize the volatility of the sun, and it can kind of be overpowering. Speaking of astrology, and again, it's not my strong suit, but I do know a few Leos, and Leos, their personality is so big. They walk into a room and they just take over everything, and they can kind of not understand that other things are going on around them. I must have some Leo in me somewhere. Somewhere in my chart, I must have some Leo, because I can relate to that. But they may not understand that there's other things going on in the room around them. They just become the center of attention, like the sun in our solar system. It's the center of attention. It's the center, and that grandeur is impressive and it's powerful, but it is also not always good. It's not always positive. There can be so much light shone that it doesn't reveal some of the more difficult things, or creates more shower. Right, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow idea. So there is a secondary aspect to the sun that we kind of have to recognize with the sun.